Hi, everybody. Mike Bloom here, getting you ready for my interviews with the final four of Australian Survivor Redemption. At long last, we have come to the end of quite a windy road. But every step, I would say, has been immensely enjoyable, though I do not think that maybe Caleb and Jackson and Laws would agree after that torturous endurance challenge. But at the end of it all, 24 episodes have aired, and we have officially crowned a winner. Massive congrats to Caleb, our current reigning sole survivor. You'll be hearing my interview with him, as well as Jackson, Laws, and Sally. Quite the final four here. Got the opportunity to have them all open up about all of the moves they made to get to the point they did going into this week. And look, one of the weeks we thought was going to be the most straightforward may have been one of the most wild weeks we experienced this season. Obviously, the fire making that allows Caleb to get to the final three, where he wins the immunity challenge and decides to vote Laws out of the game. A decision that left us all on island and off absolutely flabbergasted. But in the end, he is still able to secure a win for himself, sitting alongside his heated rival in Jackson. They open up about that and much more in my interviews. But first, if you missed it, did some really great coverage of these final three episodes. If you want to relive all of our thoughts on the malarkey as it unfolded, the episode 22 Final Four recap with Chappelle, the episode 23 Final Three recap with Puya, and then all three of the recap uncles came together to talk through all our thoughts on the finale as well as the return of the reunion to Australian Survivor Redemption. And I would say put a punctuation mark at the end of this season, but really, it's an ellipses because the postseason has officially begun. The next thing you'll hear after this podcast is one final Australian Survivor Redemption check in with the one and only Shannon Gus. Shannon is invigorated from the end game of this season to come on, give her thoughts to what the past 2 weeks have been, because a lot has occurred since we last talked. She can give her final thoughts on the season and look ahead to what's next with Australian Survivor. A change in location, but another season is guaranteed. So stay tuned to that. I'm very excited to hear Shannon's thoughts on what transpired over the past fortnight. And then the deep dives begin. And given the incredible entertaining quality of this cast, I'm sure there are a lot of people that you all want to hear from. So please let your thoughts be known. And all that being said, since we've got plenty to serve you up, even though the tribe has spoken, we're going to keep talking. So make sure you subscribe at WeKnowGlobalSurvivor.com. Let me also use this opportunity as well to give a profound amount of thanks to all of you out there. I am no Shannon Gus. I know this. I do not compare to the amount of analytical insight and brilliance she is able to bring, the passion and detailed orientedness of breaking down every single second from every single one of these 24 episodes. I endeavored to try to do my best. These players certainly had a bit of a challenge for us to live up to, given all the things that they were doing and certainly questioning whether or not they were the right things to do. But regardless, I had such a great time getting to not only talk about this season, but talk to this entire season's group of castaways, the final four included. I also want to give it a special shout out to not only Chappelle and Puya for being my recurring weekly co-host, but all the alumni from the Survivor community that I got to bring in as well to talk on a weekly basis. Eden, we've got Laura from Brains versus Brawn 2, of course, the great Omer Zahir. We've got Caroline. We've got, of course, Matthew Haywood from Survivor UK, and most recently, Noonan. Thank you all for coming on, offering your insights, especially, again, breaking down some of the wildest gameplay I've seen in quite some time. And I cannot wait to keep discussing it, not only with Shannon, but in hopefully the days and weeks to come with some standouts from this fantastic cast. And speaking of this fantastic cast, let me stop prattling. Why don't you hear from them? So thank you all again so much for your support all season long. Without further ado, here are my interviews with the final four: Sally, Laws, Jackson, and our winner, Caleb. All right. Here we are, folks. I am thrilled to be talking to the winner of Australian Survivor Redemption. He made his mark on the game, and I'm not talking about those scary faces he drew on the parchment. Caleb, how you doing?
So good, man. How are you?
I mean, but paling in comparison, I'm sure, considering that you are probably, I know it's been a little while since the actual reunion aired and you were revealed to be a winner, but I
Mm.
imagine you're just basking in living on cloud nine for the past week or so.
Mate, yeah, I just want to start with saying big fan of the podcast. What you do is so awesome.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, man, it's been such a wild 6 months after pitching my awful pitching my awful pitch that I did, right? To then sitting in the reunion. Like, yeah, what a journey it's been. And yeah, I'm just so glad to be a part of it.
Well, we're so happy to have you be a part of it. Now, I want to focus on that 6 month hiatus for a brief portion of time because yeah, you had to face what not a lot of Australian Survivor winners got to face. They usually find out right there in the moment if they won. You had to wait for the better part of half a year. But I am curious, as the jury gets up to vote, did you feel like you had won this game, or did you think that Jackson had snuck away with this at the last second?
So I started thinking that I have made the biggest mistake of my life, right? I started to implode further, further, further. But then people like Mark and Loz and even Keely, right? Literally had to carry me through half of it and be like, Caleb, you need to start claiming moves because you're not going to win. And I think at the end, I brought it back. But like in that 6 months hiatus that I had, right? I started feeling like, oh, hang on a sec, this might be the blind side within a blind side, right? I'm like, people are telling me, like, yeah, Caleb, we think you've got it. But I'm like, they're going to say that, and then it's going to be this huge last final blind side at the reunion. So, man, it's been a long, rough 6 months.
Well, were there any votes you got or didn't get that surprised you once you found out who voted for whom?
um, Look, I was so surprised to get Keely's vote,
Mm.
right? And that, like, touched my heart because she said something to me at the reunion that I'll never forget. She goes like, Caleb, me and you went into the game with two very different ideas of what Soul Survivor meant for each other. For her, it meant to play this immaculate, strategic, almost, survivor villain character, right? And she achieved that in the time that she was there. Where me, I was all about, how many crabs can I catch and snails can I eat and like rafts and fire and all that kind of stuff and like I just had to make moves that came organically to me. I never went out there being like I'm going to be as strategic as I can. I was like I want to put survival in Survivor. And she goes, the fact that you achieved your Soul Survivor, your personal Soul Survivor, is what got her vote. So I think she really saw through the game and, took onto the character and voted accordingly, which I'm very grateful for.
I do want to talk about your pitch here for a second because, yeah, as you mentioned, it did seem like at a certain point you have these people saying, like, no, this is what you need to say. So I'm curious, was it like you were expecting them to ask you different questions? Did you just have a different way of contextualizing your game from what they were suggesting to you?
Mate, I tell you what happened, right? I had kept my chips so close to me in my game, okay? I didn't even let, like, you see me in the show saying, like, Sally's talking my game up, maybe better than I will do, right?
Mm.
Because I never was writing my moves down in my head. I was just surviving the game to get through another day, right? I wasn't even looking at them as moves. So when it finally came to do a pitch, I couldn't differentiate playing such a hidden game and then all of a sudden the next night I have to like air everything out. Like I hadn't even really thought of the moves that I'd done as moves. It was just, staying another day in the game. So I really wasn't claiming him. And it wasn't until Mark is like, Caleb, you need to talk about how you got me out because if you don't, you're not gonna win, man. Right? And I was like, which was stressful because I was stressing out harder. I'm like, no, I'm like, I remember saying in my pitch, like, I know that half of Survivor is like being able to pitch your game, and now I'm falling short. You know what I mean? But like, Keely had been working with me in the end, and like
Mm.
I was telling her that I had half an idol, and she was like, I've fallen in love with the idea of the Redemption 3 going to the final three. And I was like, yeah, girl, I've got you all the way. And then I blindsided her, right? And she was like, Caleb, I'm a bit insulted that I was a big player in the game and you haven't even brought me up in your pitch, right? And at that point, I just lifted my head up and go, I blindsided half of you people there. And they're like, well, then talk about it. So, well, at the end, I started bringing it back, but yeah, it was stressful.
Well, let's talk about the latest of those blindsided people you sent to the jury. I have to ask you about this law's decision. I mean, this is something that left all of us floored, left the jury floored, it seemingly left David floored for what he was saying while you were walking out here. So, walk me through your thought process here.
Okay.
Obviously, you talk about on the stumps, on the pegs, things were changing. So, walk me through that headspace and how much that was shifting as you were going to tribal council.
It's crazy, man, because like pretty much all up to that day, I was taking lots to the final two, right? I meant it when I said it in all my IVs and stuff like that. Like in my confessionals, I'm going to take loss. And then on that last day, something shifted in the both of us where I wasn't getting the same eye contact from her. I wasn't getting the same body language from Loz that I'd been getting all day, right?
Mm.
And then I started convincing myself, hang on a sec, Loz needs this move. She needs to vote me out so she has a big move on her CV, right? And then up being on the pegs, and after Jackson goes off the way he did, and then me and her both aren't getting off, I was like, something's not adding up here.
But
She's
but,
not
but
gonna.
we from what we saw, you were the one that told her like, no, I'll get off once Jackson falls. But was it a mutual decision? Did you both agree to offer to the other one if Jackson stepped off?
Yeah, kinda, but like I was never stepping off. I was never gonna step off, right? I wanted to wear that necklace, man. I wanted to wear it so bad. And like another huge thing is taking Jackson. I wanted to beat Jackson in every single possible way that I could, right? Like I just knew if I don't take Jackson to the final two, he's always going to be able to say, I could have beaten Caleb in his pitch, right? I could have beaten Caleb in the end, right? He was always going to be able to say, if I get to the final two, I would have beaten Caleb, right? And I didn't want him to be able to hang that over my head, right?
Mm.
So I wanted to beat Jackson in every single move I possibly could, right? And so I took him.
Was it tough to do from an emotional perspective? I mean, you were sitting there at tribal council being like, Laws, I owe you my life in this game. I would not be here without you. And minutes later, you blindside her. What was it like for you to actually make that decision, knowing how close the two of you had gotten?
Look, I literally found a switch in my head where I could just, it was like I took my mind out, right? Because if
Mm.
I was thinking about what I was doing, I wasn't going to be able to do it. So I was just able to turn something off and just do it. And like it hurt, right? And I didn't sleep all night. I was doing kung fu on the beach to try and fight my inner thoughts, right? Because like Jackson fell asleep straight away when we got back to the beach, and I'm like, "Ugh!" So I just went to the beach and I was just pacing up and down, like, what have I done, right? Have I like I just didn't want Loz's daughters to watch her go through such agony for 4 hours and then sit there for another 4 hours on a little stool and have to fight her life against someone who's probably going to win next to her. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's just like, it's going to leave such a bad taste in my mouth. You know what I mean? So, like, I thought, well, I could just let you down right here, right now, and I don't have to drag out your loss. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Because I genuinely believe that, like, if I sit next to Loz, I'm going to win. Now, do I want to rub salt in her wound for 4 hours, or do I just want to make it a quick, goodbye, Loz?
Mm.
So I kind of felt like I'm gonna drop you down really quickly and hopefully gently instead of prolonging why, you shouldn't have it for 4 hours. Like,
Well, let's talk
yeah.
about the man you left sleeping on the jungle floor that night. Let's talk about Jackson here because you do talk at the reunion about how it feels like a mutual respect between the two of you. But was that always the case? Because it does seem like there are points where the two of you are legitimately mad at each other. You know, you go after him after the Ben vote. He certainly may take some snipe at you. What was it like to operate with basically a rival in this game?
Yeah, look, nothing's ever easy, is it? And I think me and Jackson's biggest problem is how we're quite similar in people. We are both showmen, right? We both wear our heart on our sleeve, and we are both, as much as we don't want to admit it, emotional guys, right?
Mm.
Now, he saw me that day dressing up like Dirty Harry, and I remember after I went to shake his hand, and he like whacks my hand, and I'm like, wait, what the heck? And then we had that big double merge tribal, and I remember him starting to talk, and then I started to talk to Mark while he was talking, and I remember him just turning around, going, "All right, I'm gonna make this guy look like an idiot." You know what I mean? And it was on. It was a battle of the redemption season, and it was serious. Like whether he says that wasn't real or not, we were literally like going at each other a few times, and. Look, it made for great TV. I meant it when I said to him as well. Like, imagine seeing us in the end, Jacko. Like, battle of the ages. We don't know who's gonna win. Let's give the people what they want. Let's make some great TV here. But I remember like when we finished and come out of the game, we were in a villa and we drank like every single cocktail on the menu and just like spoke about our game and everything that had happened and really just like got along finally.
What? Yeah. Once the lights had finally gone down on Tribal Council, then you can finally pick up your drinks and be able to get to know one another.
It was wild, right? It was so wild to mate getting out of the game and like all of a sudden going into a room, right? Where I hadn't even been in a room for like over 2 months. I remember going in there and being like, yeah, I've got to go out. And so like I said to me old man, like, Dad, I got to go outside. And then I remember like as soon as I walk out the door, there's a big crab hole. I'm like, Dad, let me show you how I catch a crab. And I stick my hand in there, let it nip my fingers and be like, see, Dad, this is how I do it. And it's like, what's going on right now?
Oh my God. Well, I do want to talk about one of your biggest marks on the game with a man called Mark here. So I'm really curious. You were at the final 11. What made you decide that now was the time to go for him? Because this Simon plan was sort of happening. And from our perspective, you're pitting Ben and Mark against each other. They were willing to work together on this vote, but you spread this lie between them. What made you decide right there, right then, this is the time that I get rid of Mark?
Look, so there was a few names going on. Simon was in the firing line, right? But I also knew that Ben wanted to get Mark out as well. So I knew that it wasn't going to take that much manipulation right now to get this ball moving. Now, Simon had been coming up to me saying, Caleb, if you get Ben out tonight, it's your move. You've got my 500 grand. He was pitching to me the exact same move that he got Jackson with.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, when I watch Jackson fall for it, I'm just like, man, you know what I mean? Like, I was just, yeah. Anyway, so I managed to feed on that and be like I could literally, in front of everyone, take this name and take that name and tell them, like, Mark, Ben's coming for you so hard. Even though Ben was just like, had a bit of a whack the last night, and I don't know if he even wanted to go for him anymore. But I'm like, Ben, tonight's the night. Mark's gunning for you like crazy. And he's like, like, no way. And then I just did the same to Mark, and somehow I got away with it, right? At that point, I was just like, this is my ride or die moment. You know what I mean? I got to do this for Rich. I got to do this for everyone, because if I don't get him out right now, we might never get him out. So I took the punt and it paid off.
So one of these connections you make, perhaps in lieu of Mark, is with Laws. I want to hear more about this relationship from your perspective, because this really came out of nowhere for us until the last few weeks. Was that the case for you and her as well?
Yeah, I mean, Loz was such a breath of fresh air for me, right? Like, she's the most amazing person ever, right? Like, she's got such a pure heart and pure soul, and it couldn't have come at a better time. Me and Loz were both, not in a great place at that time in the game.
Hmm.
You can be friends with everyone and have nobody. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how we both felt. And she just came up to me and like, my biggest downfall is actually making that move of like approaching someone. You know what I mean? And she approached me and she's like, Caleb, you seem like a great guy. I reminded her of her brother because he's covered in tattoos and we have a bit of a similar, like, personality. And she's like, can we just not lie to each other and like tell each other the truth. Because she'd been having a hard time with Simon, she'd been having a hard time with a few people on the tribe, and like she saw that I'd been having a few whacks from people as well. And I'm like, please, this is exactly what I need. And mate, it is a key to Survivor is actually having someone who you know is not going to lie to you and you're not going to lie to them. It is so powerful, mate. And like we are testimony to that because we became from nobody to a power couple. And like, look, man, and it all come from honesty. It's crazy.
Well, you talk about that honesty. I'm really curious. You talk at the final tribal council about wanting to be that sort of like support system for everybody out there to get along with them on a variety of different levels. I mean, how much of that was an out and out strategy versus who you are, Caleb? Was this something that you were like actively pursuing, or was it more so, hey, this is just kind of who I am in my day to day, and if it works out for the next 45 days, so be it?
Great question because I had really no strategy at all. Like I had the Operation KBC, which was like trying to float between two groups, but that's all I had. So all of my social game and everything else just came organically. You know what I mean? Like I generally wanted to make friends out there. So I think, and like I said in my pitch, I'm really good at finding something that I can relate to anyone. It doesn't matter what walk in life you are, who you are, what kind of, religious view or anything you have, I can find something that I can relate to. And I guess that just, shone through how people kept me in the game. You know what I mean? Like Loz keeping me in the game, that's almost as powerful as me taking out Mark and stuff like that. Like she had no reason to do that apart from we were so honest with each other and wanted each other there. You know what I mean? So, look, as far did I plan it? No, I didn't plan any of that. It just happens to be a feather in my hat.
I'm glad you brought up KBC here because obviously it was talked about a lot in those confessionals and in your final tribal as well. Playing double agent, working all sides of the tribe. How were you able to do that? Were you ever worried that you get caught, saying different things to different people? Did you get caught at certain points doing that?
Yeah, you get caught, but then you just tell them that you are telling the other group what they want to hear, right? So, like, I remember sitting at home going, all right, if I do this, crazy bit cautious game, won't I be able to physically walk straight past my alliance, go to the other alliance, give them information, and then I'll just tell my mates, oh, I just gave them false information. Even if it was true, I can do that to both people, right? But there is an art to it, right? You have to be so compelling and you have to play the game so well because you got to trick the best. You know what I mean? So, like, if you can pull it off, props to you. I saw a few people on this season try and, crash and burn because everybody knows, oh, they're just telling people what they want to hear, but you've actually got to make the people truly believe that you are on their side. And it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, yeah, you talk about tricking the best. I mean, one of your earliest, biggest moments was at one of the first tribal councils you go to, one where you're a guest bellowing to all ends of the earth that all returnees must die. Something you're more than happy to communicate back to the other returnees that you're assumingly working with. So, talk to me a bit about that. How are you sort of negotiating being one of the biggest mouthpieces of this anti returnee bias while also working with the returnees at the same time?
Mate, I was so scared after that tribal council, right? I was just like, Caleb, what have you done? Right? Because like I went in there, year of the underdog, we got to get out all the returnees, but I also wanted to show that tribe that going to a tribal council is not a bad thing. It's your opportunity to get out big
Mm.
players. Like you need to go to tribal council. You need to. You need to find your tribal council legs. You need to find your tribal council voice. And you also need it to get at the people who are effectively going to beat you. You know what I mean? So I was like, guys, don't. Why the long faces? We should be happy that we're all here right now, getting out people that are going to effectively get you out. You know what I mean? Did I look? If I was going to do it differently, I wouldn't target people. Like I wouldn't target Harry, being like, "Why do you deserve my 500 grand?" I wouldn't target Simon. Why do you need another car? That was something that probably put a big, X on my back. But at the same time, I wanted to show people that, I'm not scared either. But then I had to go back to my tribe and be like, I remember standing around the fire and being like, oh, I didn't really mean anything that I said, Mark and Brooke, I don't actually want to get the returnees out. And they're like, Yeah, no, it's all good, Caleb. And I was so scared that we were going to go to challenge the next day, and Dave was going to be like, "So, Caleb, you want to get out or returnees?" I'd be like, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up." But, again, I just got lucky and managed to just skate through.
Well, the last thing I want to ask is about redemption at its core. And this is something we heard you say in the very first confessional of this season about how you've been searching for something greater and bigger. You've always felt you've come up short. Was there a moment or period in the game when you finally sort of like locked in and felt that you had gotten your redemption? Was it
Yes.
until the very end?
Nah, right. So like I noticed the game fully changed for me. So this is what you don't see on TV, right? With the Simon going home vote. I remember going to Brooke and I said to Brooke, "We need you to come over to our alliance tonight. No one actually wants to go to Rocks, right? If you vote Simon with us, I'll give you anyone you want from my alliance. Who do you want out? Who do you want?" She's like, "I want Cam." I go, "Consider it done, right?" Here's the thing, they can't show that on TV because you're gonna know who goes home that night, and then you're gonna know who goes home the next night, right? So I had to go around that night and or the next day and convince everyone that Cam is becoming a big player. He's now becoming and having chats with everyone on the beach. We've got to get him out. He'll be a threat before we know it. Hence, Cam goes home. Now, after that happened, I just noticed my game. I just saw the finish line and I just saw the light at the end of the tunnel. But, like, being a kid who grew up loving, survival and nature, and I just knew that I could always do it, right? And I was just hoping that I would be given the chance in Survivor, even just to show my personality and my game. And I think that was a very pivotal point at the end of the game where I'm just like, I am now redeemed. I've had all these moments, I've caught the fish, I've caught all these crabs, I've had these funny moments. I had so many moments that didn't make air, like, me and Rich one day, we were having this strat chat about trying to get Mark out, right? And I had watched this smooth-scaled gecko, like, drink nectar out of this flower every morning, right? And so we went to this banana tree, and the flower was there. And as we're talking, I'm like, "You see that flower? There's always this gecko that comes." And as I'm saying it, the gecko comes behind out of the flower and starts drinking the nectar. And I'm like, "Oh, look, it's happening." So, like, I'm so glad that all these little amazing moments happen for me because that's what I always wanted as a kid. And like at the start of the show, I said, "I'm doing this for younger Caleb." You know what I mean? So my redemption arc actually went full circle, which I just think is so perfect for the season. It's so perfect that it happened to be me as the winner that had that huge, come to Jesus moment. And like, everything went full circle. Like it was written in the stars. Like,
Absolutely. Caleb, my man, you play with fire. And I say that in so many gracious terms because you are someone who is incredibly authentic, which I think people seek in an incredibly inauthentic game, but you still had the capacity to be that wild man, which again you are at your core, but it's clear that within that wild man aesthetic is a heart of gold. And
thank
so
you.
I'm so grateful that you got the opportunity to be able to not only play this wild season, but actively contribute to it as well, all the way up until the penultimate day. Kept us
Yeah,
on our toes no matter what. And I just want to offer you, from the bottom of my heart, just the biggest form of congratulations because
thank
I
you,
can
mate.
tell that this was an experience that meant a lot to you. And I could feel that you were genuinely authentic in the final two when you said, like, even if I do not take home the win, I feel like I have earned my redemption. So to go home
Yeah.
with $500,000 on top of that is just icing on the cake.
Mate, it's so good. And like, the fastest person to burn their string in AU history, like all of these amazing moments, like I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity, a better game, you know what I mean? Like it has literally changed my life. So I'm so happy.
Well, I'm so happy that we got the chance to talk with you today.
Yeah.
Well, stay in touch. We might have a larger chat in the works later on. And there's a lot of specifics I still want to get your thoughts on, Caleb, because again, there was a
Um,
whole 45 days of stuff, not just gecko nectar licking that I'm sure went on that you want to talk about. But for now, I wish you nothing but the best to you and your family. Continue to bask in this incredible glow because you deserve every morsel of it, my friend. Thank you so much again,
Thank
Caleb.
you so much, mate. I appreciate every bit. Lovely to talk to you, man.
You as well. Take care, man. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye. Jackson, you have made it through the fire, through the flames of Final Tribal Council, through the agony of standing on pegs and through the feeling of defeat and not the ones that you're feeling on the bottom of your legs as you were walking out of tribal council. How are you doing right now?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's nice to wrap it all up with a tight little bow. I couldn't be more happy with, the game that I played and getting as far as I did and all the amazing people I met along the way. It's really cool. And I'm feeling like the big shine of it now. I know it's going to be a short amount of time, but right now it feels really nice.
Well, let's keep living in that shine here. And it's just good. You had a little bit of a hiatus from that shine to live in, at least. You guys had a very unique circumstance, especially for Australian Survivor, where the winner wasn't announced on the island. So you and Caleb sat there for the better part of like 6 months trying to, I'm sure, walk through every single thing that happened at that final tribal. So I'm curious, from your perspective, when the jury gets up to vote, given everything that went down, how did you think the votes would go? Did you think there was a chance that you were going to win this?
Not really, no.
Hmm.
No. I thought it'd be a 5-4
Okay.
to Caleb, at least. I thought it would take a lot of luck to get me across the line. I was probably not 80 to 90% sure that I was not the sole survivor. The only vote that kind of caught me surprised was Keely. Um, but I think having that made me like gave me time to adjust that I wouldn't be going to the bank come April. So I knew that the odds were not in my favor. But I also remained very busy with wrestling and stuff. You know what I mean? I was back in a wrestling ring within 6 days of landing back in Australia. So I stayed busy. I
Wait,
stayed.
you went through 45 days of malnutrition and pushing your body to its physical limits, and less than a week later, you're back in the ring.
Gosh, yeah, I did. Yeah, grind don't stop, baby. And you know what? Getting back into the ring was really hard. Everything hurt so bad. But for my brain, I think it was very, very good just to get back into the swing of it and not have to sit and just wait. You know what I mean?
Well, let's talk about your perspective on this final tribal council because, as expected, you come out of the gate swinging, really big, fun, bombastic opening statement. As the night was going along, did you feel like things were going in your direction, or did you always feel like it was going to be an uphill battle no matter what?
I felt that people came in both on my side and Caleb's with who they were voting for, and I don't think the pitches would have changed it.
Hmm.
So I was very happy with how I was pitching, and I was like, "This is really cool. I'm doing really, really well." And Caleb was not doing very well. So maybe for like split seconds here and there, I thought, "Oh, maybe I could swing this." But mostly it was like, "Yeah, this is an uphill battle. I don't think I'd get much. I'd have to. I did for my money an amazing pitch, like the best I've ever seen, and it would have taken that and some to sway that jury, I think. So yeah.
Well, let's stick on the Caleb train here because the two of you certainly were not seeing eye to eye, it seems. So it's interesting. You guys talk at the reunion about how it was a form of mutual respect, but was that the case actually on the island? What were your thoughts on him? Because it seemed like quite a number of times you became a little aggravated with the things he was doing.
So pulling down the curtain, the TV curtain, as it were.
Please.
I never had any real beef with Caleb. If we go back and look, my thought process was simply this. This was big double tribal with like 16 people there. I'm there to get myself over, have a good time, cut promos, and do all this wild stuff. I'm going to get washed away here. There's too many people competing right now. What can I do that I know is going to like make people lean forward on the couch at home? And on my bucket list of survivor things before you go in that they make you right, one of mine was start a rivalry. And I was like, I looked at Caleb and I knew Caleb could talk and hold his own because who wants to see a rivalry where I just like beat down on someone they don't have anything in return? That's not
Right.
very fun. It just makes me look like a bully. I knew Caleb could give it back. So I was like, you know what? Bang, Caleb, stuff you for dressing like Dirty Harry. But I will admit, right, even though it was like for the show and just having a bit of fun, there are points out there where you kind of do get emotional about it. You've made it up in your head a little bit, but when he stole that big breakfast from me, ooh, that got under my skin. And I know I did some things to him that got under his skin in return, but mostly for the most part, we both kind of had this mutual like, let's have fun and put on a great show.
So he takes you and puts on a great show at the very end here, shockingly taking out Laws instead of you. What was your reaction to that? Do you feel like the pitch you made in that moment influenced his decision at all?
It had to. It had to, because if I know anything about Survivor from watching it, within the edits, they will make it seem like it could go multiple ways, right? With the confessionals, with everything that they have. If you go back and watch the episode, there's no point in which Caleb says maybe Jackson.
Hmm.
There's no point where Caleb goes, "Oh, I'll take Jackson." And the only difference maker, the only thing that's edited into the show that could make you think that Caleb was actually going to take me was my pitch at Final Tribal Council, at that second Final Tribal Council. Um, and that's the only difference maker throughout the whole thing. And Caleb also has made a dozen different reasons for why he took me, which makes me kind of think that maybe isn't so sure why he took me. And I think that maybe my words were a bit of a factor in him taking me to the end.
All right, well, let's go all the way back to you entering the metaphoric ring here, because you get pinned to the mat a couple times early on. Cameron's throwing your name out first. Obviously, you lose Eliza. So, talk to me a bit more about your sort of reaction to what the first few weeks in the game were like for you, and how did you have to adjust things once you start realizing I'm on the bottom, my number one ally's gone. Clearly, I have to do something else.
I hated it. I hated it. The first 2 weeks was so rough, man. I didn't really know what I signed myself up for. I am not a big Survivor guy, and I was just like, let's do it. This sounds fun. Um, and yeah, number one getting booted. I'm on the bottom, which I didn't even know what the bottom was until I was there. Um, so it was kind of like, what do I do? But then I kind of started to figure out that Survivor is much like wrestling. You need storylines, you need rivalries, you need good versus evil, you need compelling pitches. And once I kind of figured out the bones of that and like Survivor, it's a show. Wrestling, it's a show. This is showbiz, baby. I can do that all day. Once I kind of figured that out, it was much more enjoyable because I started making moves. I started chirping up at Tribal Council. Paula is there, and I'm like going after Paula with the revenge knit, and then it's Harry and the Flint, and now I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm moving. And also, because that first 2 weeks was so rough, I didn't really care if I went home. Send me home. Do it. I dare ya.
Yeah,
You know
so
what I mean? And that was
I
my attitude.
well, I want to talk about this Harry vote. Did you ever entertain the notion, speaking of fiery, flashy moves, of actually going with him on this Flint gambit, holding it hostage, or were you always going to reveal who had it and really sell him down the river?
I was definitely going along with it at first. When he first pitched it, I was like, in improv, you always say yes.
Right.
So I was like, yes, 100%. I got nothing else, may as well. And then it wasn't until kind of on the way to tribal, waiting for tribal, I was like, ooh, I've got something here. Let's cook. But more than ever, watching it back, I would like to see what would have happened if we just let it ride. You know what I mean? What would they put the votes on Rich?
Mm.
I'm not sure. And like watching it back, it would have been very good TV either way. You know what I mean? To
Mm.
see how that move developed, if Harry could pull it off, if I could pull it off, like it would have been very, very cool either way. But look, I don't have any regrets about my game. I can't take anything back. So yeah.
Well, your game catches fire when you hit the swap here, because you find your people initially, and Beauty and the Beast forms. Now, it looks like from our perspective that you were really the architect here. You're bringing together Simon and Ben and Brooke and Laws. Was that the case? Talk to me about what made you decide to form this group and truly change your fate in the game, as opposed to just sticking with the bounty majority.
So Brooke and I became quite close very quickly. We have a mutual friend in former player Matt.
Mm, yes.
I just was like, it'd be so boring to just vote out Brooke. It'd be so boring. And also, Archer and Lottie weren't exactly asking for my opinion. They said, we're voting Brooke. And something that Harry told me is if someone tells you how to vote, tell them to go stick it. Yeah, yeah,
Well, that
yeah.
speaks to your redemption story, though, right? We even see you talk about how outside of the game, you felt like your entire life you have been forced into labels. People have told you, like, this is what you should be doing. So I imagine, given the theme of the season, anytime somebody does that, you're like, no, stuff it. I'm doing my own thing.
100%. And that's really what the Beauty and the Beast were. And me and Ben were super tight too. So I was just not keen on leaving those two on the bottom. I wanted to bring them up. And, Simon kind of said like he's not happy with it. I knew Loz was kind of teetering in that bottom area. So I just essentially grabbed a bunch of people who were in trouble from the bottom, had Simon there with me. And I said, it was funny. I went to every single person and kind of individually in the day and told them. And then we went to bed that night. And then Simon woke me up and I went down to the beach and there was every single individual person I spoke to. And I was like, oh, no way. Yeah, it was cool.
All right, well, let's talk about a couple of important relationships within this alliance. Let's stick with Simon here because this is a weird dynamic. It seems like the two of you are working together closely, but then at one point when Mark gets involved, you say to him and to us basically like, I do not trust a single thing this man says. And we'll obviously get into, your choice to work with him down the line. But talk to me about your varying thoughts on Simon. Like, did he really betray your trust to a certain point of no return?
Yes, he did. And you know what? I betrayed people's trust, and it just took me a while to figure out Survivor and took me a while to figure out that that's how it's going to be. But weighing up Simon, I never trusted anything he said. But
Hmm.
in saying that, there were times in the game where we had mutual interests. And that's when you can really, really trust someone in Survivor, when you can see that their interest is aligned with yours. And that's how you can move forward with people. And sometimes our interests were aligned and sometimes they were not. My interest was to get Mark out. Simon needed him for a shield. I understood that. It betrayed my trust. But later on down the line, it was in Simon's best interest to get in good with myself and Ben. And then he voted Brooke. Even though she didn't go home, there was a trust vote and he did it. So it's just changing mutual interests. And although I never fully trusted him, I could trust and see what his interests were at that time and then work with him. It also really, really helps that Simon may have been the best shield in the game.
Hmm.
So I needed that as well.
All right. Well, we need to get into this move, Jackson. We need to talk about your decision to flip on Ben. So, from a timing perspective, was this done at Tribal Council? We see you pause for a really long time. You tell Simon, like, he says, this is your show. And he says, yeah, it is. I'm voting Brooke. Did you make the decision in the booth, or did you decide to do it beforehand, or even before even getting to Tribal?
Seconds before we went to vote.
Wow. Okay. Was there
So
anything that pushed you over the line?
Um, so I remember sitting down the end of the line of people and just looking across and just kind of counting numbers and going, oh, if I do this, I sit with Keely, Brooke, and Simon, three shields who will definitely get voted out before I do. If we're lucky enough to take one of the underdogs, but I've got my ticket to the final four if I want it. It's right there. That was kind of my thinking behind it. Just seconds before we went to vote, I looked down the line at Simon and Brooke and Keely, and I like nodded, pointed at Ben, and said, "Ben, let's do it." Um, I could have pointed at anyone at that time. Like that's what people haven't thought about really, because I told Simon Brooke,
Hmm.
and hey man, they could have put their votes on someone else, and then there's one vote on Ben out there, and then I've stuffed it. But I told them Ben, and then that's why they kept their vote on Ben, and that's why it stayed solid, and that's why it worked.
How difficult was it for you to do, though? Because throughout that episode, you tell us, like, I'm not flipping on this guy. He's my number one ally. It seemed like you had this personal connection. So, how tough was it to then separate what you felt was the right thing to do in the moment from this entire dynamic you had with him?
Oh man, that's so tough. Like And you know what? In the heat of the moment, probably makes it easier because you just, oh my God, it's something, I'll do it. But if I had like another like 15 minutes to calm myself down, I probably wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? It's just like the
Mm,
heat of the moment, heat of the battle, like do something, make a move. And you know what? We got back to the beach that night and everyone was furious at me. They weren't furious because I voted out an underdog. They were furious because they didn't get to do it.
mm.
They
Well,
were like, we were going to do that. And I was like, well, you didn't. I did.
Well, you talk about the underdogs. I want to bring up something that was brought up in this final tribal council, right? Is again, in your pitches, you were talking a lot about, running with the big dogs to beat the big dogs. That you were made sure you did not go kaput in kaput. You were the biggest beast of Beauty and the Beast. And it is pointed out, there are these people sitting on the jury that, to Blanche's extent, felt like you did not necessarily acknowledge them from a social perspective. What was your reaction to that? Did that take you by surprise at all?
It did take me by surprise. Um, it really did because although it's not shown in the edit, I could tell you 20 things I know about Blanche. You know what
Mm,
I mean? We did spend a lot of time there together. I know about her beautiful girls. I know about her group of friends that go down to the pub on the weekend. They drink Jack and Coke on the rocks with no rocks. I know so much about every one of them. It's impossible not to. And it was the first time that it occurred to me during the pitch um, that I had been not so nice to some people. Um, but in my head, I think a lot of that steam came from people that I didn't work with.
mm,
Everyone that I worked with can say that were very good friends. And it's hard to draw those lines out there. I think Blanche confused a non-personal relationship with people that she worked with. And you know
mm.
what? Blanche and Caleb were the showmans of the season. I was never getting her vote anyway.
Oh my God. A couple times in this very interview, you had mentioned, you want to make a show of things. You wanted to, make a big spectacle as you are wont to do. But it is interesting that you talk at Final Tribal Council about the fact that, yeah, you acknowledge the fact maybe you did not necessarily let yourself be vulnerable with people. Do you feel like some of that showmanship that we love to see came at the cost sometimes of connecting with people, of allowing them to get to know who Jackson is?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. It was like I was trading the title of Soul Survivor for a good resume that I could send to future employers like the WWE. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like it was providing Australia with good television versus actually winning the television show. And that's kind of in hindsight now how I'm really looking at it. Like I sacrificed probably winning the title of Soul Survivor to provide a very entertaining character. Um, and I'd do it again. Because I had so much fun out there and I really, found a level of confidence now that I think, the sky's the limit for me now. I've always had this feeling that TV was my place. And if the last 24 episodes have showed us anything, it's like I belong there. You know what I mean? I understand TV. I get it. I didn't win, but, there's more to television than winning.
Well, I want to talk about one of the moments you made great TV, and it was in this final immunity challenge. I mean, I cannot remember a performance like that in the many, many seasons I've seen where it seems like you are on the verge of collapse multiple times. You're about to puke, you're flop sweat, you're groaning in agony, and then you just lock in, and then you lock in, and then finally, push comes to shove, gravity takes over, and you just break down in David's arms. So I cannot imagine what it's like to verbalize this experience, but I'd love for you to try your best here. What was going on during that entire challenge with you?
Oh, some dark and dangerous thoughts.
Mm,
I in my head, I was like fighting for everything that I've ever wanted. I was like, if you win this, you get $500,000. If you win this, you get to retire mum and dad, because
mm,
that was my plan with the money. It's theirs. There you go. And they get to retire happily. If you win this, you win Survivor and you can send that to, say, the WWE. And they have to look at you after that. Um, there's people sitting on that jury that would kill to be in this position. Do not let them down. Um, this is everything that you've ever wanted in your life. All you got to do is stay on these peaks.
Mm,
Um, and that's all it was. It was just, and also, I feel like there was a point, not that I remember much of it, it is very blurry, but there is very much a point where I kind of knew I wasn't winning
mm.
that challenge. Like, Caleb's 35 kilos, 40 kilos lighter than me. That's a tough task. And probably around the time that I got that second win, I knew I wasn't winning. But also, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and take his soul on the way out. And I love that clip. I love that clip of me locking back in, and it goes back over to Caleb, and I love that. He starts asking questions. You know what I mean? He starts asking those questions in his head, and I love doing that to people. I love taking souls like that. And look, I knew I wasn't winning, but it's Rocky Balboa round 15. He knew he wasn't winning, but he got back up.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about an emotional gut punch to yourself and all of us. And your story was so beautiful over the course of the season. Obviously, the redemption you were seeking in part was feeling like you had disappointed your parents by sort of going down your own path, right? Dropping out of university. To see your mom there, it was one thing to see her on the video, right? I'm sure you had felt like, okay, that bridge was crossed. But to see her there, and not only see her there, but knowing what she had gone through, and to have her embrace you in that moment where you probably felt your worst in a while. Talk to me about what that was like.
Ah, life changing, like out of body experience. Um, I have this like how you take snapshots in your head of memories, like, and you think back to them. You don't even realize you take them, but then I flick back to this one where I'm laying on the ground. I've given it absolutely everything, and there's Dave, and there's my mum, and there's a medic holding up my legs. And I have this snapshot in my head of like I remember thinking in that moment like I cannot believe that this is something that I've done right now. Like I've done it. I've Man, keep the 500, keep the title. This is it. Like this is all I've ever wanted. And if this is the last thing that Survivor ever gives me, I can retire a happy man.
Wow. So then, how are things between the two of you now? Now that you've sort of, as you mentioned on the mat, kind of come to this realization of how similar the two of you are, and obviously, as you mentioned, having this incredible bonding moment during this challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like we talk about it a lot, but like it's back to usual life. Like, how's the weather up there? You know what I mean? We still don't live in the same city, but yeah, we've never been closer. And as a kid and even a young man at university and such, we weren't really that tight. I didn't let her in a lot. I had those walls up. I didn't let people in. But now she knows everything about me. I tell her everything that I'm doing. And yeah, we talk all the time, which is that sounds very simple, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Richard asked me recently, like, how's the relationship with mum now? And I was like, man, it's night and day. You don't even know, and
Wow.
it's unspoken too. It's just because of that bond we have out there that it's just different now.
Well, listen, man, if that endurance challenge proves anything, is that you are willing to put so much on the line for the sake of not only 500,000, but making appealing TV in front of our eyes. And, sir, you won that in every single capacity. You kept us zigging and zagging this entire way through, but I could tell how much fun you were having doing it in the process. And again, just this arc you had, being able to find your redemption in so many ways, right? To break away from when people told you what to do and be able to make plans for yourself, forge your own path, to have someone that you thought would never say was proud of you, get the chance to embrace you and say it's okay that you fell off. I'm always here for you. You are the best son I could ever ask for. I mean, I know that the win is a big W, but it feels like you had so many other victories along the way. And so I just want to give you kudos, man, because it feels like such a very personal journey for you. And I know that you say you put up walls and you put up this character with everybody else, but I think we got to see Jackson throughout those entire 24 episodes. And I'm just grateful we got the opportunity to do so.
Wow, thank you so much. That was quite a wrap. That was very,
Listen,
very nice.
I had to
I
match
feel
up
like
to your standards.
I feel like you sold me. I'll vote for you. No, that was a nicer rap than I could have given myself. So thank you. Really, I appreciate that.
Of course, man. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much again, Jackson, for taking the chance to talk with me and opening up about so many of these things. I really appreciate it. But I'm glad to hear everything's going well with your family, and I wish you nothing but the best. Cannot wait to see you on the WWE. When, not if. It's going to be there. Scott Green is going to be mainlining.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I have high hopes. We'll see what happens, hey.
All right. All the best to you and yours, man. You have a good one, Jackson.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
Bye. Okay, I have finally picked my jaw up off the ground to get the chance to jaw with you, Laws. How are you doing right now? We can talk about all the emotions you were feeling in the moment, but I can imagine watching it back is both an entirely different experience as well as having all those emotions come flooding back as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a teary one last night, seeing us up on the pegs and having our families and my kids out there. Lots of tears. I'm really puffy today. Um, but it was incredible to watch, and I just feel so proud.
Well, we have to start with where this episode ended because we were shocked, the players were shocked, the jury was shocked. How shocked were you? How confident were you the second Jackson came off those pegs? I'm locked into the final two. And what was going through your head when that vote turned around and your name was on it?
I feel like going into the final endurance challenge, I was pretty solid. Like Caleb and I had the chats, ride or die. It's like, we've got this, we've just got to beat Jackson. But then something happens when you're up on those pegs, and in that moment of, the emotions and the psychology and the physical pain, you really do reflect uh, on your game, and you've got your family there. So I think it all just kind of fell away for us. Like we were in it, and we were starved and we hadn't slept. And having Jackson go down like that, it was so emotional. And yeah, so at that point, I started to be like, oh, are we solid? I don't know. Like, this is intense, man. And by the time we got to tribal, I was questioning it. I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna take me. And part of me didn't want him to take me. Like, I wanted to take myself. I
Mm.
was like, this is my chance. I don't want anyone to take me. This is me. And so there was a lot of emotions and a lot of stuff going through my head at that stage.
So then, how much of that stuff was ire? As you're heading over to the jury, it's a tough turnaround to come back 24 hours later and vote for some. Obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of emotions going through your head. Was there a lot of anger, first and foremost, towards Caleb for what he did?
I don't think it was anger. I just feel like it was more, all right, I've just lost my chance at $500,000. You two, you need to prove something tonight. You need to show me your game. I want to see it all. Um, and yeah, like I'm gonna go hard on you, like because this is 500,000 and I'm not sitting there and you two are, so let's go. That was the attitude going in.
Okay. Well, I'm curious because you mentioned, how you wanted to win, back yourself, get that resume point. Let's say that you did. Like you said, a lot of stuff was falling away during the endurance challenge. I'm sure you were watching your family, sort of getting some visions as to how you could win that 500,000. So, when push came to shove, if you had to cast a vote and you had to bring someone to the final two between Caleb and Jackson, who would it be and why?
I think going into the endurance, yeah, as I said, it was Caleb. But on the pegs, everything shifts, and I really would have reconsidered that decision. I would have weighed up, everything from the game, the players, their resumes, what I felt the jury was wanting to see. I did think Caleb played the better game. But I thought Jackson would do the better pitch. He's a showman, he's articulate, he's funny, he's amazing. So that would have been what I was weighing up. Um, I thought it was going to be quite close with those two. So in the end, I would have chosen Caleb. He was my ride or die. It was my game. And I think I would have done a better pitch having Caleb next to me. I think having Jackson next to me, he would have just gone me hard and the jury would have just ate it up. Like you had returnees there that loved the flash, they loved the shock. So it would have been tough, but I think it would have been Caleb in the end.
And how do you think you would have done against him, considering that it seems like one of the ways one of the reasons he got rid of you is because it's tough to differentiate. That's sort of the pitch that Jackson made. Do you feel like that would have been the case with the jury as well?
Yeah, I think it would have been really, really tough. Like looking at the jury before the pitch, I think he would have had more votes. So it really would have come down to that pitch and really dazzling, really explaining my social game and how that led into my strategic and the decisions I made and what I did. So I would have really had to come out from the subtle game under the radar, that social game, and really prove myself. And it's really hard to prove a social game in this game that isn't flashy. So I would have had my work cut out for me. Um, but going in there, I think Caleb had more votes.
Well, let's rewind one round here because while the power might have been out of your hands at the final three, it was theoretically in your hands at the final four. You had been approached by Sally and Jackson. They're saying, we're both voting Caleb. Let's get rid of Caleb. So, how much were you genuinely weighing this on your mind, and what led you to ultimately keep Caleb in the game essentially by forcing this fire making?
Mhm. I did have a lot to weigh up. Obviously, Caleb was my ride or die, and I thought, yes, he would do really well in the endurance challenge. But also, Sally was a really strong player. She had great relationships on the jury. She played an amazing social game, and she would have done really well in that endurance challenge. Like, she was a yoga queen, and I just knew she wouldn't take me. I could just see the relationship between her and Jackson. It was very special, and in the end, I just felt that Caleb was the best choice. I'd been with him in my game. He was my ride or die. And I just wanted to continue with that game. I wanted to sit with him and it just felt the right decision.
Let's talk about Jackson for a second here because he described it as sort of like this Tom and Jerry relationship, right? Where like the two of you were on the bottom of Bounty 1.0, and then you're working together in Beauty and the Beast, and then you're continue to work together in the early part of the merge, but then he flips over and you're enemies for the rest of it. So talk to me about what this dynamic was like through a very tumultuous 44 days.
Yeah, we had a really weird relationship, and I think it just stemmed from the start of the game. I'm basically double his age, so we're just different generations, and he just didn't really see me or value me or want to play with me. He was doing his thing, and I had my thing going on, and so we just didn't really gel together. And even though we came together for the Beauty and the Beast alliance, we never really trusted each other. Um, and so post merge, like, yeah, he just annoyed me. And like, we just had this funny relationship where he kept writing my name down. I'm like, stop writing my name down. And like, I was definitely like more of a mum and he was the kid. So we just had this funny relationship. We were just trying to get each other out and getting annoyed by each other. But then we had this PEGS experience together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just beautiful. And I saw him with his mum, and it was like we finally connected in this final endurance challenge. And yeah, and I really love him, and we're good friends. But it took a whole game for us to almost see each other and respect each other and love each other, which is kind of crazy.
They should have brought the pegs out sooner. If they brought it out like final
I
10,
know,
you'd be
right?
locked in for the final two at this point. Well, let's rewind to the early part of the game here because you mentioned the swap, you mentioned Beauty and the Beast. I'm really curious because you had vocalized to us at a certain perspective that you felt a little torn between, this newfound Beauty and the Beast alliance and this relationship you had with Asha, Lottie, Cameron. It wasn't shown on the show, but they have certainly told me as much in their exit press that they had good relationships with you. So talk to me about you getting your bearings in that new Baron tribe and what led you to sort of go one way or the other here?
Yeah, sure. So what it wasn't shown was when I went for the sleepover, I connected with Brooke and Mark because I knew about Brooke's idol through Lyndall.
Right.
So we'd established this little connection where I was like, look, if we go to tribe swap, let's look after each other. I'll look after Brooke and Mark, you look after Lyndall, and let's just have a foundation there in case we ever on a tribe together. So when we did get to tribe swap, the new Baron, I connected with Brooke straight away. And I just said, look, you're in trouble, like these guys are coming for you. And I had this element of like, I do want to try and protect Brooke potentially if Mark looks after Lyndall. And at the same time, I was on the bottom of the bounty.
Hmm.
So even though I was solid with Ash, Cam and Lottie, they were a tight three. And I just knew that Lottie would never write Ash's name down. She basically told me, she's like, I never will. And so I kind of felt like, look, I'm on the bottom of that alliance. So it makes sense to flip over to this Beauty and the Beast, where I felt like I had more, it was more equal in the power structure. I was really tight with Simon, and I had this relationship with Brooke. So while I felt torn because they were like my crew, I did feel like in the end it was just a better move for my game.
You mentioned Simon. I want to get into this relationship a little bit because, yeah, he gets pitched a couple times like, okay, you and Laws will flip back over. And we obviously see a couple of moments towards the tail end of his game where, you're saying confessional, for lack of a better term, stuff it, Simon.
Stuff you, Simon.
He's trying to tell you that you don't have options. So talk to me a bit more about this dynamic and how did this change when you go from obviously working together to being on quite opposite sides?
Yeah. So when I arrived in the game, like Simon was working me hard. He was always talking, about the game and giving me tips and really trying to reel me in. And that worked well for me because he has so much knowledge and experience and he's a great player. So we just had this really solid bond kind of from the start. And that came into even more solid after the Lottie vote. So we were really tight, and he was really tight with Rich as well. And I was really tight with Rich. So we
Right.
had this really solid three that was happening sort of behind the scenes that wasn't shown so much. But I definitely felt like I could be Simon's ride or die. Like with Lyndall on the other side, it just worked well. But then we head into merge, and I'd set my game up to basically move into merge with the returnees. So I was tight with Brooke. I'd look, being across the mat, I made eyes at Mark. Brooke and Mark were tight, and Simon. And so I put myself in a really great position and geared my game up to work with those guys. But then I got there and I realized, oh my gosh, these massive power players have all just gone boom with Simon, Brooke, and Mark. And Rich and I were on the bottom of that alliance. And we just kind of knew we're like, oh, what have we done? Like, we're with these power players. We're going to be safe, but we're going to have no power.
Mm.
So that was when we were like, actually, we need to take Mark out. He is so huge. All this vengeance was coming towards him from all the newbies. We really had to make the call at that stage because we were sitting right in the middle of those two alliances. And so we made the call. We talked to Simon, but he was just like he chose Brooke and Mark because that was better for his game at that stage. He felt, and so when he wrote Rich's name. Oh, I was furious, like absolutely furious. I'm like, what have you done? Like, we had your backs, Simon. Like, Rich and I were so solid. We would have protected you. We wanted to work with you. And so from that point on, I was frustrated with Simon. And then he started kind of like speaking down to me, and I
Mm.
was like, yeah, nah. So that door kind of closed on Simon. I couldn't trust him, and yeah, and we got started to just get frustrated with each other because he kept on trying to approach me to make moves, like, I'll let you have a move on Jackson. I'm just like, nah, nah. So I was quite stubborn, and I didn't want to play with him anymore.
Well, to that point, I'm curious to find out who you did want to and end up playing with here. Because, yeah, it seems like going to the merge, you'd sort of had your plan set most with Mark, with Brooke, with Simon. So when that gets scuttled, right, when you start targeting the returnees, what relationships were you seeking out amongst the other newbies?
Yeah. So at that stage, I really had to shift gears again, because Rich was another one of my ride or dies that got booted out. So we had Lyndall and we had Rich, and then I had the fallout with Simon. So at that stage, I needed to pivot and be like, okay, who's my new bestie? And Caleb and I really started bonding around the fire. We were really great in camp, making the fire, collecting firewood. It was always us two. And we kind of felt like we were the stragglers in the game. Like, people may not necessarily were taking us serious enough or valuing
Mm.
enough. And so when we got together, we were just like, oh, you. And it was this beautiful moment where we were just like, oh, can we just, talk genuinely to each other? And so finding Caleb really shifted our games and we became really tight. And also we had Sal and Cameron as well. So we just became a really powerful four. And at the same time, there was a powerful three with Sally, Caleb, and I. And then the next layer was this powerful two with Caleb and I.
So let's talk about the fourth person in that group. Let's talk about Cameron here because it was certainly shown to us that the two of you at least seem to be associated with one another, right? There's another conversation where it's, hey, Cameron's going to flip over to the returnees, but he won't do it unless Laws does it. So I need to hear about your relationship, and I especially need to hear why you turned on him. Was it as simple, Laws, as not getting taken to IKEA?
So Cam and I were super tight. He's like the best person in the world. He made me laugh every day, and we had actually just we shared beautifully on a deeper personal level as well. So I loved Cam, but I did burn him in that Arsha vote. And then I did burn him in that Lottie vote as well. So while we were really tight, I was also super aware that, oh, I'd kind of done him dirty as well. Like I hadn't voted for him, but I'd taken out his best friends, and you kind of don't forget that.
Mm.
And so when it came to that point, and he didn't take me on those rewards, to me, it just showed our relationship in the game. And I was also grumpy, not just because he didn't take me, but he fueled Keely as well. Because we were trying to get out Keely, and I'm like, Cameron, what are you doing? Like, you've just given her like lamb shanks and coffee. Like, so I kind of got a bit frustrated with Cam, and I really needed to start kind of showing a lethal game as well. So I kind of influenced that vote, and I was like, "Look, Brooke, you took out Simon. We're gonna, protect you this next vote. We'll take out Cam." And I said to, like when Caleb and I were speaking, like Cam was talking about Sally being a bit dodgy. So she's throwing, Cam's name out. So there were lots of pieces that came together to make that vote happen. And there was concern that Cam could make, a big move and do one of us. So that's the way it all came together. And he should have taken me on that reward.
On top of that, a cherry on top of the cake that was not eaten the next day at breakfast. I'm curious because you mentioned this lovable lethal line, which is so much fun, but you also talked about the fact that you felt maybe as the game was going along, you were worried about what's my resume look like, and led you to certainly at least contemplate making some moves. Floating out Caleb at 5, possibly voting out Caleb at 4. So talk to me more about that. Was there a certain moment or time when you started thinking, oh, if I want a shot at the end, I need to reconsider my approach to things?
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly those points in the game where you feel the pressure. You can feel the pressure from the jury. You've got returnees on there. They want the showiness. They want, the big flashy moves. And it just wasn't my game. Like, it
Mm.
was definitely a very intentional game. It was built on relationships and weaving between alliances. And it's really hard to demonstrate that social game while you're in the game and then also pitch it to the jury. So there were definitely points towards the end where I was like, I haven't really played a game for the jury. Like, and so I started to try on these different hats of like, well, what if I did this? What does this feel like? How would that feel like as a shocking move to do that?
Mm.
So I certainly was trying them on, but ultimately they didn't benefit my game and they didn't feel rational. Like Keely was a power player. Like she'd made the big strategic moves. The jury were loving her. So to keep her in the game, just it didn't make sense. But I definitely felt the pressure of wanting to do the shocking moves. But in the end, it just didn't make sense for me.
Well, to that point, there is a confessional you have actually towards the end of the pre-merge where you say, "Being a good human has served me well in this game, and I don't want to burn anyone." So talk to me about that, because that is the eternal conundrum of Survivor, right? Is how much you play true to yourself and also making these relationships and the difficulties that are rife when it comes to actually trying to cut these people to earn yourself $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly used it as part of my strategy of being, a great person to have around and really go hard on the social game that people wouldn't want to vote me out and they would trust me. And I think it's one of my skills is making people feel comfortable, and feel solid. Like I had a number of ride or dies. Um, but it's tough. Like it's certainly tough when it comes to those points of, do I need to cut them? And I think I could have done that if I felt it was the best for my game and to win the money. Like I certainly I had my kids out there. So,
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, I'm doing it for my family and my kids. And I was aware that I've known these people for a few weeks. Like, I think I played a very aware game and I knew what I was doing. But at the same time, I just wanted to play my own game. I didn't want people to tell me what to do when there were people trying to tell me who to vote for. Like I always felt like I did the vote that I wanted to do. I played with the people that I wanted to play with. And when it came down to it at the end, I didn't want to play a people pleasing game for the jury. And I didn't feel like I needed to validate myself for the jury. Even though that is part of Survivor, it's the game, what gets you the money. It wasn't the game I was playing and I felt proud of. But yeah, I was prepared to do it if it made complete sense, absolutely.
Well, the last thing I want to ask is about your redemption here, because you talk obviously about Survivor being a very important show for you and your late father. And obviously, with everything you've been through, you said that your redemption is a quote, reclamation of my life. So, after walking through all of this, do you feel that is the case? Do you feel like this experience allowed you to reclaim the laws that you have wanted to be for the past little while?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I feel like, prior to having children, I did like amazing things with my life in terms of climbed high peak mountains and, climbed Kilimanjaro and went on adventures. I lived a very big, full, edgy life. And moving into family life, you're having kids and family, and you're in the trenches and through divorce and like tumultuous years. I certainly felt like I had an identity reclaim and a sense of self to reclaim as a woman, as a mum. And I felt getting to play this game was absolutely incredible. It put me on so many edges, it tested me, and it just showed how strong I am. And also showed that, if you put your mind to do something, you can do it. Like I said, 1 year, I'm going to go on that show and I did my application video. I set my whole life up. I did the training. I was so focused. And I came out the other side, having completed that, having done that. And I absolutely feel like I have reclaimed this sense of who Loz is. And I'm kind of like, well, what's next? What am I going to do next? Because, we can do anything. At 47, you can still do anything. And I hope that I can inspire, other women in their 40s, their 50s, that they can go out and really chase those dreams as well.
I mean, hell, you just stood on these torturous pegs for 4+ hours, while
I still got
malnourished,
it. I still
sleep
got
deprived.
it.
You never lost it, Laws. You
Thank
never
you.
lost
Thank
it.
you,
So
Mike.
so thank you so much for taking the time to open up about all of this with me. It's sad that we did not get to see so much of all the stuff that was contained within your game. So I really appreciate the opportunity for you to open up a lot about this. This does seem like a game that you really took to heart and valued at the end of the day, and I think that is certainly
Yeah,
something that you can take home, especially as you mentioned, as this final sort of exclamation point at the end of this one sentence, but with many, many more pages to follow in the Book of Laws. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and talking to me about everything that occurred over quite the up and down
oh,
game for you.
thank you so much, Mike. Much appreciated. Great
Of
talking to you.
of course, all the best to you and the girls and the rest of the family, and cannot wait to see what happens with the next
Oh,
adventures, Laws. Thank you so much
thank you
again.
so much.
Have a good one. Bye. Sally, I see the cactuses behind you. We need to talk about the prickly situation that got you talking with me right now instead of a couple days from now when there's a final two sitting in front of us.
I know. I can't believe it. Um, yeah, went out in a bloody blaze of unglory. What's the opposite of glory? That's what I went out in last night.
Well, I want to ask about whether or not you saw that unglory coming, because you and Jackson were both pitching to Laws throughout the day to get rid of Caleb. She seemed like she was on board. So how
It,
surprised were you that the vote was tied up and specifically Laws was the one to force the tie?
I was shocked because I thought Loz knew what an incredible game that Caleb was playing. And I really did think she wouldn't want to sit next to him at the end and that she wanted to get him out because, yeah, he's a very nifty player. And I really didn't think she would want to give someone else a fire move either. So I was shocked. Yeah.
Well, I know you also mentioned in your jury's out video that you did think for a second that if there was a tie that was forced, that it would be Jackson who would be the one to force the tie instead of Laws. Why is that?
Um, I think I was more solid. I think I thought I was more solid with Loz than I was. And obviously I hadn't been playing with Jackson, so I didn't really know. I couldn't trust him. Whereas with Loz, we'd voted together so many times up until that point. So you really just, I mean, at that point of the game, at top four, you do not know where the votes are going to go. You don't know who's working together. It is so chaotic. The pitching, the scrambling, you were all pitching each other. So it's a very, I mean, it's such a heightened part of the game. And I didn't think Loz would be the one to flip and save Caleb at that point. So I was definitely shocked because I wanted to go to top two with Jackson. That was my plan.
Interesting. You want to take Jackson to the final two.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that.
Why?
Yeah, well, I thought that we had a different game. I could differentiate my game to Jackson's a lot more than I could with Caleb and Loz. You know, Caleb and I had been playing the game in the same tribe since day one and Redemption Beach. So we'd spent every single night together, aside from when I went to the reward. So our journeys were very similar. Our voting was very similar. Our strategy was somewhat similar. And so was our motivation to play the game. You know, we really wanted an underdog to win, which started on day one on the beach for us when we went to Barron, when we saw the returnees, and we were like, I want an underdog to win. I want someone that's never played this game to win the game. So I didn't want to sit there and say the same things as Caleb. And I didn't want to sit next to Loz and have a similar story to her. Jackson and I, very, very different. Jackson played a game full of bravado and he knows how to use his words. He can really talk the talk. And I played almost opposite to him. I kept, quite a low profile, but yet had more control of the vote, where Jackson played a higher profile game, but had less control of the vote. So I was really going to use that to my advantage if we'd gotten to final two together.
Now, there was one moment only a couple of days prior where maybe your game wasn't so low profile, Sally. We need to talk about what happened, or I guess more importantly, did not happen with this half idol. So let's
Yes,
walk through the process here.
let's
When
walk
you were
through it.
when you were walking into tribal council, I mean, did you have any sense that Keely had the half despite her claiming not to? Did you have an idea still formulating in your head of like, if Keely has the idol, we could put these things together and make something happen?
Yes, I thought that Keely had the idol. So when I found the half idol in the tree, this is if we're going to walk through the idol, we need to start at the
Please.
start.
Yes, yes,
Find,
yes.
find a half idol in the tree. I'm a Survivor fan. I find a half idol and I lose my mind with excitement. And then I read the scroll and it's like, you found half idol, the other half is somewhere on the beach. You and the other owner of the other half of the idol must make a unanimous decision onto who to use the idol for. Lo and behold, Brooke, someone not in my alliance, has the other half. She says it herself in some of the episodes, like, we both need to make a decision on who it's for, me and the other half idol. And she thought Caleb had it. And she was like, well, Caleb's got it. We're not going to agree. So it's void. And she was happy for it to be void. And I kind of wasn't. I was like, I need to do something with this idol. You know, I can't let it slip. I knew Brooke was going home that night, so I had 1 hour to try to convince her to give it to me before she went home so that I could potentially use it tomorrow night if I needed to. I didn't need to save anyone that night. Brooke was already going. I just needed to get the half idol. So that was attempt number one, was come up with some kind of plan so that Keely, Brooke, and Jackson, that alliance, trusted me enough that I was going to get Caleb out so that Brooke would give me her half. Didn't work. I know she's going to give it to Keely. That's why, Keely didn't tell me that. You can see in the episode that her and I are like skirting around the issue. We're like,
Yeah.
who's got the half idol? I wonder. One of those, iconic Survivor chats where it's like, why are we even bothering? But here we are, trying to pick up something from each other. It's not what you're saying, it's what you're not saying,
Mm.
one of those. So I get to tribal and I'm like, this is my last ditch effort because after tonight, this idol is null and void anyway. It can only be used at top five. I knew that I could only actually use that idol to save whoever Keely and I agreed on in a unanimous decision. I know I'm the split vote that night. I'm either voting for Loz with Keely and Jackson, or I'm voting for Keely with Caleb and Loz. I want Keely out of the game. She's an amazing player. She will beat me. I cannot keep her in the game. So what am I going to do with this half bloody idol? Keely tells me she's got it. I go fishing for it and say, oh, I wonder if someone's got it. Keely tells me she's got it, and I'm thinking, surely I can do something. I've got to do something so that the jury just know I have this idol and know that I've tried, and so that I can do something that I can bring up in the pitch. For the life of me, at least let me have something to demonstrate the social game that I played. Because I did play a very social game and I did
Mm.
make connections with everyone. And I really wanted the half idol. If I can't use it to save someone, if I can't use it to bluff, if I'm so limited with what I can do with it, at least let it demonstrate the social relationship that I still had with Keely up until that point, even though we weren't voting together. At least let me show that Keely trusted me enough to think I was going to save her. You know, if I can't do anything, that's at least something that I can show the jury. So, was it perfect? No. Was it clunky? Yes. But that is me as a Survivor player. And at least I tried to do something. It didn't really work out, but I really wanted it, if anything, as well, to show Caleb and Loz, I'm with you. You know, I am really with you. You think I'm going to flip tonight. You think I'm being sus. I'm not. I've always been with you. It's just, you know, that's what the half idol was. It was more, I guess, about theatrics, which is what a lot of Survivor is, really, tribal theatrics.
Did you ever debate like playing the idol on Laws as an example, especially since you're voting with her, to be like, hey, this is how I'm locked in with you?
Yeah, I just don't know how I could have used it to gain any leverage with Loz, because I couldn't, like, the idol had to have been used unanimously between me and Keely. So what I can do with the idol is limited between what Keely and I agree with. So
Oh,
Keely's not going
so
to agree for
even if Keely gave you the second half, you could then be like, okay, if you're okay with this, we'll use this, or
what my understanding was and what it said on the scroll. The idol must be played unanimously between the two owners of each half.
interesting. Okay, that's huh.
Okay.
That's
So
interesting.
that's why you see in the episode, I'm sitting there going, I don't know what I can do. What
Hmm.
can I do? I really can only save Keely. She's not going to agree to save me.
Yeah. That.
What can Keely and I agree on unanimously with this idol?
Hmm.
So I'm sure there are other options of what could have been done, but at this point of the game, I want Keely out because she's an amazing player.
Yeah.
I trusted her the least. She sent me to Redemption Beach, and her and I had never regained that trust after then. So it made sense for me to get her out, but I didn't want to save her with the idol. So, I mean, you can see where my mind was at that point. I'm like, what can I actually do? I can
God.
either do nothing and have let that opportunity for the half idol completely slip through my fingers. No opportunity to talk about it at pitch, no opportunity for me to get it out of my pocket. And as a Survivor fan, I didn't want to do that. So the best thing I could actually do was just to show the jury, you know, I did find this and I've tried really hard to do something, but the best thing I can do with half an idol is to just not play it, is to keep it as a
Okay.
best friend charm, because I wanted to show the jury that even the people I was working against were still some of my closest friends and were still potential allies.
Gotcha. Okay, that context does help. I mean, I'm curious when you end up getting voted out a couple days from now, what was sort of the reaction from Keely? Because she's, from our perspective, seemed a little steamed to say the least by what had gone down. Was she feeling the same way? And did that take you by surprise?
Keely was very, very gracious when I entered
Okay.
the jury villa. There were no qualms at all from her. I think, you know, obviously, she would have preferred that I had kept her in the game, as I promised that I was going to with the half idol, and clearly she did trust me. So I think I did break some trust in a very, um, you know, kind of out their way in front of the whole jury. But you know, that Survivor, and she was, absolutely fine. We're still really good friends now, and she's such an incredible person that there were never any ill feelings. After, when I saw her exit interview, I was like, oh gosh, but I mean, and I know she understand where I was coming from. Thankfully, I got to go into Jury Villa and have lots of conversations with people about exactly what was going on at that time, and everyone understood. So, um, yeah, we're all still besties. There's no juicy scandal there, unfortunately.
Well, I want to stay on that Keeley note because it's so interesting. Your pre-merge, especially the latter portion of it, was all about the three wise women. Now, maybe a bit of that falls apart right towards the end there when they're like, "We're gonna go for Sally," and Faith ends up going. So, what was your relationship with Keeley like going into the merge, and did that contribute to the two of you kind of being on separate sides for the rest of the game?
My relationship with Keely was really good on Baron from day one. It was very clear that we enjoyed each other's company. We had a lot of stuff to talk about that wasn't Survivor, and that actually becomes something that you value a lot when you're out there, is these people that, you do feel comfortable with, and it's not just strat chat and that's it. So Keely and I did have a very good relationship. Um, I could see that her and Faith were obviously in a very strong alliance with Mark. And, pre-tribe swap, my name came out of the urn. Mark wanted me gone. And then post-tribe swap, it was another precarious position for me being in that tribe that I ended up in, because it wasn't people I felt super comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
So I really had to kind of insulate myself with people that thought I was really loyal and that I was really solid with them, because I knew if I didn't, Mark was coming for me. I knew that that was the case, because he knew I was part of the alliance at the very start of Baron that wanted him gone. So I needed to really make sure that he thought I was with him. So not only did I make a really strong alliance with the three wise women, but I was really trying to prove to Mark that I wasn't going for him anymore. And that was kind of where the alliance between Keely, Faith, and I started. I will say that I really did it just to protect myself. I had no
Mm.
intention of working with them with longevity in the game, because I knew they just saw me as a number. But that's what I needed at that point. I needed them to trust me, because Mark and his minions, it was so strong and so scary, and it was such a force, and a lot of it was very invisible, and I didn't want to be the next one gone. So I think that's also almost like demonstrated with the Don vote, like I was still pitching Mark, and I didn't know that Don was such a strong minions of Mark. But thankfully by that point of the game, I had worked so hard with Keely and Faith to trust me that Keely switched and blindsided Don to save me at that point, because she needed me as a number to get Mark out eventually later in the game. So that was basically my strategy. My entire strategy was to be really loyal, to be a really faithful number, but to also be in control of the vote and who was going home.
So then when the game becomes individual, you are sort of marketed to us as like this free agent. You can really go anywhere. So who were you connecting with? Either, faces like Caleb from Barren Beach or new people like Laws who you had not met basically until that moment happened.
Yeah, I was kind of a free agent. I mean, my strategy going into the game was just to play a strong social game, because I know that's what I'm good at. I can connect with anyone, and I can connect deeply with anyone. And I know that I'm a very likable person most of the time. And that's what I wanted to really play on. So by the time I got to merge, I was in a position where I could have really played with anyone. Up until that point, I'd been with Keely and Mark mainly on the Bounty 2.0 tribe. So when that all started happening, I actually flipped from that kind of returnee alliance to join the newbies, because I was really good friends with them too. So, and they also trusted me. So that was a pivotal point in my game. Post merge the Lottie vote, I really stepped back. I'd just come back from Redemption Beach, and I'd
Right.
really been considering, what the heck am I doing? Keely, who I've just been kissing her ass for about 10 days straight from that point, just to try and be safe, has now voted me to redemption. Can't trust her anymore. get to merge, looking around at this whole new cohort of people. Everyone's, going off in little groups, and you're just like, oh, what's going to happen? And then the Lottie vote happens. And I loved Lottie. But after that happened, I was like, nah, I can see what's happening. It's the returnees have come together with Keely, and Mark still probably has some minions, and they're going to pick us all off one by one. So that's when the newbie alliance really took off, and that was a very fun part of the game. We got with Ben and Jackson, Caleb, Blanche, Cam, Loz. Rich also came with us, which I thought he was going to go back to Simon, but he ended up coming with the newbies. So that was a very fun part where we all that's when we started to band together. It obviously wasn't flawless. The Mark vote, there was quite a few votes that were like, you could see that we didn't trust each other enough yet. So we couldn't really come together cohesively and make a strong vote. And it took a couple of votes to really cement that. And that's what going to tribal does. It allows you to see who you're working with. So after merge is really when the game got fun for me, and where I really started to pretty much see who was going home with every single vote. I kind of knew who was going home, and that's where I wanted to be.
Well, you talk about this newbie block being one after voting a couple times. There is one exception. Now, you were the first person I get to ask about this Cameron vote because the other people didn't really know what was going on. So,
Yeah.
how did this come together? It seemed like on paper you had Brooke dead to rights, you had survived the game of chicken that was the near rock draw. How did this Cameron vote come about?
The Cameron vote came about essentially because he seemed like the first newbie that was going to turn on us. So we actually saw in the episode where he gets voted that he starts going Sally Shifty to Caleb. And at that point, Caleb had no reason to believe I was shifty. I was absolutely not being shifty. I was newbies all the way. And Cam was kind of making us really question that, and making the newbies really question that. And there were lots of conversations with Cam that happened that you're just like, we can't, we're not doing that. Like, that doesn't make sense for any of us right now. And he was doing a lot of talking. That's what Cam does. He does a lot of talking. And I absolutely love that guy. But with an alliance, there are times where you have to cut the fat in a way, because if there's someone that's a little bit of a liability that starts affecting the strength of the entire alliance, if you've got the numbers and you feel like you're in a comfortable enough position, sometimes you've got to let them go. So that was kind of essentially what happened with Cam. It wasn't really that deep, but it was at the point where it was like, if we don't do something about it now, where we can control it, it's going to bite us in the ass later. And whether or not it would have, I mean, I don't know whether it would have. I don't know whether Cam was just saying a lot you know, to play the game, but yeah, I think he just said a bit too much, and it
Hmm.
ended up leaving his torch to get snuffed.
Were you worried about facing a possible 3-3 after that, or did you think that, you can move forward, you, Caleb, and Laws, and be okay, even if you took one from your own ranks?
I wasn't really afraid of moving forward. No, I wasn't afraid of that 3-3 because Keely and Brooke were already really going for each other at that point.
Oh, really?
They were really going for each other. And they both knew that they'd have to get each other out at pretty soon. Pretty soon, because they'd both played, big games, and they were both big threats to each other. And so they were just waiting for the right time for that to happen. And no one was going to go to rocks in a 3-3. It just doesn't happen. That's the time to get out a threat, and that's an easy time to flip and use the numbers to your advantage. So I was absolutely not worried about that 3-3. I knew it would be whoever didn't win the immunity necklace.
All right, let's end on a bit of a personal note. Now, you referenced a number of times throughout the season, of course, the tragic loss of your brother and how, your redemption, besides getting to play the game that you love, was to turn, what'd you say, the story of victimhood into a story of victory. And you say when you win the car in that first challenge of the post-merge, you say that, you channeled your brother through those worst moments and he helped you get this car. Talk to me a bit more about, almost from a spiritual perspective, what this experience meant to you. Did you feel like you were able to, for lack of a better term, connect with him out there in those moments when you were hit with the hardest stuff?
Thank you for asking. That's really beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I am a massive Survivor fan, and I am also a massive spiritual believer. You know, my faith is so strong after losing my brother. You know, there's been so many unexplainable things that have happened since he passed, and so many miracles that I really do believe that he is a guardian angel for me. Getting onto Survivor was one of those miracles, you know, so was getting to tribe swap and merge and winning a car. And when you are having those moments out on the beach where you have no friends out there that you can trust, I mean, every conversation is transactional. You are missing home so much. You are thinking about every moment in your life that got you to that point. It really is a very existential experience being out there. I could just hear his voice so much, being so proud of me and encouraging me along the way. And that's why I essentially applied for Survivor, was
Wow.
because since I've lost him, I've really, you know, after extreme periods of suffering where I never thought I was going to smile again, literally never thought I would be able to find joy again. I have. And every time something more beautiful happens, you know, initially it's a shock, but now I'm starting to realize that, hold on, I actually think all that suffering has made my life better in some crazy plot twist that you don't experience when you are deep in despair. So that's what Survivor has been for me, was I just wanted to prove to myself, like, Sal, look what your brother has given you. So much strength and so much resilience. And I'm really honored and privileged to have been able to do that for anyone that's lost someone to suicide, or, you know, anyone with mental health problems, that you will get through it. And there is a light at the end of that big old black tunnel.
Well, thank you so much for speaking so beautifully on that. And thank you for everything that you have given us, let alone Survivor has given you. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, it was far from the smoothest ride for you, but I think it speaks to your tenacity and your ability to get through from, the first moments of the tribal council where you're just being told, like, vote for Johnson, through the last of it where you had been able to control that post merge. It speaks to not only your skill set, but your ability to persevere, which I think directly translates to, what you've been able to bring outside of the game carrying forward in Eternum. So thank you so much, Sally. This means the world that we got the chance to chat and to hear a bit more context as well, I think, about a lot of the stuff that you were doing. Obviously, I wish that we were talking when you were sitting here at the final two, $500,000, Richard. But for lack of a better term, Sally, you brought the fire in this conversation.
Yeah. Look, I won a car and I got to top four, so it's a win-win for me, Mike.
Oh my God. Well, so glad to hear. This was a win for me to get the chance to talk with you, Sally. So seriously, thank you so much. Again, all the best to you and your family, and cannot wait to see what happens next with you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so grateful.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
You have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.